Good morning, everyone. Today is the 2nd of July, 2020. Welcome as you come in. I'm Roy Potter, and as you know, I've had the chat on for a few minutes, so you all would know that this is coming up. I broke ranks a little bit this morning. I'm back to my, as I suspected, I was right all along cup. Under the circumstances, I should probably have my Second Amendment cup, but this certainly applies as well. I'm just astounded at the way things are going down. So, my biggest disappointment is that our so-called leaders, and I'm talking about those from the White House on down, are engaged in the same thing that our enemies are, which makes you wonder if they're not the same people. We have some serious attacks going on in the country now, not just attacks on monuments, but attacks on people. And they're going to move to the political figure soon. And as soon as they do that, then of course they're going to get all upset and start to take action, which is going to be an overreaction against people like you and me. Not so much against Antifa, BLM, or the insurgents, be they Chinese forward operatives or sleeper cells or Islamic jihadists or drug cartel members or gangsters like MS-13. And we've already seen that with the couple in St. Louis who stood up. People were threatening their home, and so they merely came outside with weapons to protect themselves, and for that, the local DA is prosecuting them. Now there's I'm not sure if it's a senator or a congressman is talking about introducing legislation. Actually, I think it was just a YouTuber that or a Twitter person on Twitter that suggested this, and not a bad idea. Although we already have it under the Constitution, making a statute, an act of Congress, and then statutes to protect people who defend themselves, sort of like a stand your ground nationwide. That if you take action to defend yourself, they cannot bring criminal charges against you. In fact, if they do, then they can be charged with federal crime. You think they're going to do that? Nah, they're not going to do that because we're the actual target of all this. They know it, and the leftists know it. And as I said here, few admit a war against Americans is well underway. Most of us, a lot of us, I should say, don't admit it. But in fact, that's what's happening. I'm so, I can't even put words to my disgust. And so I won't try. But it's real obvious when I look at the tweets coming out of most of the people in D.C., and that, again, is from the White House on down, that rather than admit the awful situation that we're in, they'll kind of do it, but they won't get down to the nitty-gritty. For instance, as you know, a few days ago I put up the information that China had been found to be smuggling weapons into the United States. And the Customs and Border Patrol found thousands of these. The question is, how many have they not found? And of course, that's not even asked, which is real bad. Remember last summer, and I've mentioned this several times, I saw illegal aliens, and that's what they were, driving in a white SUV, a Tahoe, probably about a 2004, something like that, with no license plates. How in the heck were they just driving all over the place? And they had piles of ballistic vests in the back of the SUV. I reported it. I even had to go to a police officer friend of mine because the police department I reported it to just kind of poo-pooed it off. They didn't even take my phone number during the report I made. I couldn't believe it. It's almost like they're told to stand down, or they're so lazy the only thing they want to do is be revenue agents for the governments. But at any rate, so here we are. And we know all this is going on, and unfortunately, as I've pointed out, many people have pointed out, most of the problems in our country are due to our own political leaders and our own institutional leaders, be they educational, corporate, or whatever, who have been assisting the Chinese because they think that that's the best model for the world government. This is nothing new for you folks. You all know that. The problem is that this thing is escalating, as we've talked about. So, in reality, all of these things are happening, and the question is, why isn't anybody reacting to an invasion, to an insurrection, to the level that we should be? I mean, hell, instead of putting our own military on our border on the southern side, our president decided that Mexico and its army should be on the border. Thousands of their troops, who are not friendly to us by any means, they're infiltrated by drug cartels and apparently by the Chinese. I'd even go so far as to say that. They're not protecting our border. If anything, they're assisting all of these things to happen. So it's almost, and I can't just lend that to bad advice to the president. I mean, that's just bad judgment. Kushner's a problem. We all know it. And I'm not going to beat that dead horse today. I'm not here for that. But I just want you to be aware that I'm aware of it again. What I'm going to talk about today are a couple of things. One is why our leaders aren't reacting to this insurrection the way they should be. A lot of it has to do with Chinese assets and liberal, leftist, Maoist, Marxist sympathizers and even activists in our political and corporate systems, institutions, who are downplaying this and assisting it. For instance, the mayor in San Francisco, she finally acted on busting up Chaz, but only after they started to threaten her. And you might say, well, why would they do that? They were helping her, or she was helping them out. Because they're getting ready to move to the next phase, which we've already seen. And I said that they would start doing that. So, and so have some other people. So, we're going to talk a little bit about why the government that's supposed to protect us has refused to do so on every level. They're still talking about, of course, doing foreign wars and, all of that. I know President Trump is talking about pulling people out of Afghanistan and etc., but we've been hearing that story for a long time, and it just never quite happens. But at any rate, so that's what we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. And very importantly, I want to talk about a preparation that you should be making right now, along with your food, water, obviously, your self-defense tools, your medicines, all of those things. There's something really critical that you have to start preparing, and you can do it today. It'll cost you a little bit of money, but I wanted to bring this up. For the last week or so, we have been working on a C2, Command and Control and Communications, it's actually C3, system that you can implement yourselves. Now, you know that during any type of a situation, as the government chooses, they can shut down cell phone communications. That's not hard for them to do. And I don't want to give the bad guys an idea here either, but they probably already know it anyway. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring it up. You need to go back to some old style communications. And you set up basically a relay system. Remember, if you saw, well, a good example is some of the old Western movies when they'd use fires, and Lord of the Rings did this too. They couldn't project the fire far enough because of the curvature of the earth and other obstructions, where if they needed to send a signal of distress, they needed to have relays. So they would set up a relay system. And really, most communication systems are like that anyway, at least in the old days. You need to go back to that. You need to go back to written communications between people. Having a runner, of course, the problem with that is if the runner doesn't make it, right? But the other thing that I'm going to talk about here right now, just for a few minutes, and I'm going to use the map here. It's not to scale about what I'm going to talk about, but you'll get the idea. So, what communications am I talking about? Well, you can go down to your local sporting goods store. I'd say to go to Walmart, but you ought to probably avoid Walmart for lots of reasons. One, it's a Chinese-run thing these days. But, usually your local sporting goods stores and other places, you'll have to look around, will sell small handheld walkie-talkies. And I just have an example of one here. This is a Midland, okay? And the range, you can buy them with different ranges. This particular one here has about a 20-mile range. I've got another set that has a 40-mile range, okay? And that's line of sight, okay? These are line of sight communications. In a built-up area inside of a city, you're only going to get probably a quarter-mile distance with them, depending upon what's in the way, maybe a little more. Outside in a forested area, you're probably going to get several miles out of a radio that has a 40-mile capability. And then over, say a plane or direct line of sight, even over 40 miles, you'll still get a pretty good signal with these, depending again upon what they're rated for. You can buy these anywhere from where they'll go. I think the lowest I saw was it was rated for about 18 miles or so. Slightly better than a toy type of little walkie-talkie. But then you can get the good ones that go up to like 40 miles. And you can get CB radios as well. I've noticed that the sporting goods stores sell CB handheld radios and base stations. Some of those get they're a little bulky. I'm not saying you can't use them, especially for a base station. But the real thing that you need to do is get out there and start making with these people that you should have made some very strong alliances now with friends, family, and other people, and come up with a plan. Doesn't matter what the plan is, you can tweak a plan. The point is you just have to have a plan. And possibly, as I've talked about in the military, you'll always come up with 3 courses of action in that plan, right? And then when the situation goes down, you select one of those courses of action that most closely resembles what you anticipated, or what's happening, I should say, and then you tweak it for the situation as you find it. And that sounds a lot more complicated than it has to be. But one of the things that you need is communications. So when the cell phones go down, or you just don't want to be putting stuff out on the cell for any various number of reasons, this is the way to go. Now, they can jam these. Okay, I'm not saying they can't. They can. But they're not as concerned about this, at least at the beginning. Okay, down the line, if you're a pocket of resistance, they're going to jam your communications. But you're really not going there. You're not trying to do offensive activities. You're just trying to get people notified of what's going on. So let me show you how these work because of the range problem. Let's say that you have family, and I'm just going to use this as an example. And I know it's not the scale. Pretend like this is a state. Okay, just out of curiosity here, just for sake of discussion, pretend like this is a state here, okay? Doesn't matter which one. Let's say it's Texas. These only reach the furthest they will on a straight line, let's say is just for the sake of discussion, is 20 miles. But you have people, say, 100 miles away that you've got to get a hold of. Well, what you do is you set up a relay system. And you'll have a person, say, here, okay, at this point that you want to transmit from. And then about 20 miles away, you'll have another person, or whatever the range of your radios is. And you have to test all this out prior, too, which is one of the things I've been busy doing the last few days. And then you have this person here, but you want to get it all the way to this person over here. So you set up this relay system. Now, the problem with relay systems is what? Have you ever done that experiment where you tell a person, you whisper in their ear a little short narrative story, and then you go through several people, and by the time it gets to the last one, it's almost like nothing that you said? So what you have to do is you have to, especially in a situation like this, is you have to come up with some specific codes of your own or specific information that all of these people are aware of what you're talking about. For instance, if you're getting attacked, okay, come up with some type of a code that can't be degraded as it's passed. And I'm not going to tell you what that is, but it's usually something short and sweet, or even a number code like the police use, okay? And the military. Okay, whatever you want to come up with, a code that can't be degraded as it's passed along. It's very important to do that. Not saying you can't discuss things across here, but it's going to get garbled unless you require that everybody write down the message as it comes in. Well, that's not going to happen, right? So the principle here is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. However you want to design that. The main thing is for information. Let's say that you have UN vehicles rolling into your town. You might want to have a very simple thing like UN present. Just something real easy that's not going to get garbled as it goes down the line. Or if you're getting attacked, something like under attack by insurgents. However, real short and sweet so that it can go down the line and it's not going to get garbled very much. Okay, that's very important. Also, as I said, you can use other kinds of systems as well. If you have ham radios, that's great. In California, apparently, about a year ago, didn't Governor Newsom sign a bill that said that no one can use ham radios there? Well, this is the reason why, because they're planning on taking down the communications grid, not for them, but for you. Okay, yeah, they want to track you and all that, but when things get to the point where there are serious situations occurring, what have I said? One of the first things they do is they interfere with your communications. They go after command, communications, logistics, okay? And that's what we're seeing with the insurgents now, these protesters. They're not protesters anymore. I mean, there are a lot of good folks out there just exercising their First Amendment, but they're being guided around by these Chinese forward operatives, Marxist, Maoist, insurrectionist leaders and groups, and they're pushing this thing forward. So they're shooting at semi-trucks around the country, specifically I heard in Ohio. I heard last night, she'll know who she is here, but that there were some shootings in Oakland, California on the freeway. This is going to get more common. There's not much you can do to defend that except maybe take alternate routes. As I mentioned in a short video the other day, this situation of the protesters gathering around a vehicle and stopping its movement forward is a form of military ambush. What they do is they designate they don't get this complicated usually, but they'll decide where they can stop the vehicle, and the gunman will be there. Okay, so it really is a military tactic. And again, this isn't just protesters going after people in their cars. The protesters are being used as the obstruction, like in the movies you've seen where the army, the soldiers will cut down a tree and block a road, or they'll put up barbed wire or something to slow people down. Okay, and then that's a kill zone now because they can't get out. The only way to get out of a kill zone is exactly what the driver of that vehicle in Provo did the other day. And for him to be held in any type of criminal jeopardy is absolutely wrong, because he did the only right thing you can do in an ambush is attack the ambush. It's the only thing you can do. There is nothing. So that's why I say our leaders are totally whacked out. They have no idea what's going on. We're not fighting mere protesters. They're being used as insurgents, cover for insurgents. And we're going to talk about why our leaders aren't doing that a little bit this morning, but it's really disgusting. The DOD can't not know. But as we're going to talk about here, and the same thing goes with our law enforcement agencies, but a lot of it has to do with the mindset that's been put into our military and our police over the last 2 to 3 decades. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. As a matter of fact, you can go to Unconstrained Analytics. Steve Coughlin does a real good job. He's a member of Unconstrained Analytics there. If remember where I told you to go, unconstrainedanalytics.com. Okay, look up Steve Coughlin, and I'm going to give you some more information on him in a minute. But they explain why our system isn't responding to this insurrection, to this invasion, the way it should. They're using our own system against us. For instance, the president can't activate military until a governor asks for it. There are exceptions to that, and I'm not talking about the Insurrection Act or anything that would violate the state's right to its sovereignty. But we're going to get into some of that here in a minute. But at any rate, all of this has been deliberate, dumbing us down, and we're in a lot of danger right now. We don't. Most of us, as I said, few admit war against Americans is well underway, and especially those from the White House and from Congress and the Senate. They're just, and even the DOD for that point. So you have to be preparing for these things. Now in Provo, the situation that happened the other day, as I just talked about, they had another demonstration last night. This time, it was really interesting. I'd read you the article, but I won't. It's on KSLnews.com. It's the local radio and television station in Salt Lake. I read the article, and I was thoroughly disgusted because it's exactly everything that I just said about as far as covering it up. They admitted that there was a shooting and that he did arrest the suspect and then another person that was apparently involved in that, a second gunman apparently. Who apparently didn't fire his weapon. at least as far as I can tell. But they actually arrested the guy, and he was from either Ogden or Wyoming, to be surprised here. I don't remember right now. But the bottom line is, when I read the article, it was very sympathetic to the entire movement of BLM and Antifa. And when the locals decided that, hey, the cops aren't around to protect us, the governor's not around to protect us, we're going to have to do it ourselves. So they went out and they were armed. The people that live in Provo, the people that were there, showed up. I think they had the total number of people at the protest on both sides was only, I guess, a few hundred last night down in around Center Street and University Avenue or Freedom Boulevard, one of the two. Anyway, down there in Provo, only a few hundred were there. And apparently the locals came armed. Well, hell, they had been shot at the night before. A military operation had occurred. So these people came down with their weapons. Well, of course, guess who the KSL made to look like the bad people? Yeah, the people that came to protect their community, not the protesters and the insurrectionists. Again, I have a lot of sympathy. I have a lot of understanding for people who are concerned with the excessive use of force of police officers. The use of force continuum, even if it exists now, which I don't think it does, that I was taught many years ago was about bringing force up only to the level it's needed to control the situation. Now it's shoot first and ask questions later, treat people like they're criminals, treat people like they're prisoners of war or the enemy, and all that's been taught, I'll admit it, by the IDF to the and Israeli police to American police departments. Whether they've done it directly or by other means, that fact has occurred. I saw it at Bundy Ranch with the BLM, and I'm not even sure all of those were actually BLM officers. Some of them were probably mercenaries from foreign countries, and I have my reasons for believing that. But that's what we're looking at here. By the way, they would send an army. I know it was under Obama, but they sent an army. You're not supposed to have a standing army. Well, when law enforcement supposed, and I don't, in my own viewpoint, the BLM officers are there to enforce, federal regulations on government property and laws. But the fact of the matter is, I don't even consider them law enforcement. Okay, but I won't go there. I'll just talk about it that way. They didn't show up as even police officers or law enforcement officers. They sent 200 militarily armed BLM officers to go against a family. And then they wonder why all these people came to Bundy's defense. They sent an army of 200 of these guys in full battle rattle. You think they're going to do it to Antifa? To BLM? No, and you're going to find out why here in a minute. We aren't just under an insurrection. We are in a total war right now, and it's ready to go to the next level. That's the real reason why the Chaz was taken down. Those assets are going elsewhere. They've got Seattle. Right? You see how this works? They're getting ready to go. And the thing in Provo was a good example of that, and in Salt Lake, and in other places around the country. Where did they not get a foothold? A good place was Coeur d'Alene. In Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, the people came out. Just about everybody in the town came out armed. And Antifa and BLM said, we'll just go ahead and move on. That's the way it's done. The federal government's not protecting you, and in that case, the police were overwhelmed. So they said, hey, yeah, you've got our cover. Now, there's on that issue, you probably, and this has happened around the country in several places, but one came up yesterday that I want to bring up. At the Jacksonville, see if I can find it here. The Jacksonville, Florida sheriff said, here it is right here. This is from Dr. X, by the way. Thank you, sir. I know you follow me on Twitter and here. I don't know who you are on YouTube, but at any rate, he put up this, and I knew it before, but I'm going to use his. He said, Black Florida sheriff has a message for would-be rioters. Quote, I will deputize gun owners if you think you can bring your lawlessness here. And the Blaze apparently was what he was quoting there, theblaze.com. And haven't I been calling for that for how many years here? I said Trump needs to use Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution and 3, right? And fill these positions that he needs. That the Senate's still not giving him recess appointments, right? This kind of stuff. And then in addition to that, I said that the governors and the sheriffs calling up posses, deputizing people to give them color under competent authority, so they're not held to a different standard when they're trying to. And it's wrong that it even needs to go here, okay? But that's the position we're in. So this is great. We need to see more of this. And this is a black sheriff in Jacksonville, Florida. What a great guy. A lot like Sheriff Clark from up there in the Detroit area. So that's what has to happen. So if you don't have that, and even when you do, let's say that you have you've been deputized as a posse member. That's essentially what it is, and you're protecting your community. You can bet that if you end up, even if they're shooting at you, you can bet that if you shoot a BLM or Antifa member, guess who's going to come after you? The FBI, the Justice Department. You can count on it. Barr's a snake. He's only doing as much as he can so he can play both sides. Don't kid yourself. He's a politician as much as any of the others. So at any rate, those are the two things basically I wanted to talk about this morning as far as things that you should be doing and becoming aware of what's happening in the country. This is not going away. And incredibly, yes, they're hitting us on multiple fronts. They're not attacking the country in the old style of warfare. And I think you need to understand this. And I've talked about it kind of like this for a long time. They're not having, masses of armies attacking us from our flanks. We're not getting attacked frontally and then having our rear logistics bombed by the deep penetration or getting attacked on our flanks. But different waves of attacks. That's not how they're doing it. They're doing it definitely scientifically, technocracy wise. That's exactly what they're doing. They're using our information systems against us by overloading us with massive information that we can't process before they hit us with another one. I've talked about that before. They're hitting us with this whole thing with the virus, and of course, as we knew, they would hit us again because these are waves of attacks. These are planned out. There is no way in hell this isn't being planned out. These aren't just random, coincidental occurrences. They are at war with us, with the American people, not even with the government. And the government will go down because they have these ties to China and these other things. They don't care about that. But the American people is what they're after. That's exactly what they're after. And your government is warring against you as well because they're going along with it and they refuse to understand what we're up against. Probably because they want to refuse to understand. Because they want us to go down. They want the Chinese system to come in. Okay, we can see that even President Trump, unfortunately, is for surveillance now. Even though he was telling his ODNI Coates there when he first put Coates in back several years ago, hey, I want the surveillance thing to go away. That must have been for public consumption like everything else Trump does because there was never any follow-up. Oh, well, nobody's doing what he orders them to do. Well, then he's not a president. So we just have to admit that. Either way, we're on our own. So, okay, we talked about communications. You got to have an alternate set of communications. This is a good way to go, okay? Have your relay system if you have people far away. If you have a ham radio, if you're not in California and your state governor is still allowing you to have ham radios and you can afford it and get the license, do it, but they'll shut you down. Again, once you subject yourself to the FCC, by the way, you don't need an FCC license for these. It depends upon the wattage. These are normally, tops are going to be about 4 watts tops, maybe 5. You go much higher than that, and then if the FCC does catch you using it, and if even on those bands, they can give you a problem. Will they? Probably not, but they can shut it down. Of course, they can interdict the communications and jam it. So just be aware of that. Have multiple alternate abilities to communicate. It's very important. Only thing bad about this cup I really like it, but the bad thing is it's so big that, of course, the heat dissipates quickly. And I had this really hot here just 20 minutes ago. Okay. So we've talked about communications. We've talked about that the war is actually going on. Let's talk about some aspects of how the war is progressing. And make no mistake about it, this isn't civil disturbance anymore. This isn't civil disobedience and civil disturbance anymore. That's not what Antifa and BLM are being used for. I told you a story. I've mentioned it several times. I'm going to mention it again now. During the Korean War, there were huge refugee, people moving from one place to another, and the communist Chinese and the North Koreans infiltrated, disappeared amongst the refugee columns, and used those refugee columns, pretending to be refugees, to infiltrate behind American lines. Okay? That's what's happening now. They use these protesters who, and I've said, I do believe that there's a legitimate reason to be concerned about the overuse of force by police. Okay, I've said that for a long time. But remember, this was a plan to get us to hate the police. The bad thing is that a lot of police went along with this shoot first, ask questions later. And I've been complaining about that for 3 decades. I saw it coming and I've been complaining about it. If you're afraid to put yourself in jeopardy and you think that somebody else's life is less important than your own as a police officer, you need to take that badge and that gun off and throw them away and resign. But I'm not here to talk about that today, okay? I just want you to know I recognize it. I've seen it happen. But that's no reason to totally turn off the police and forces, the sheriff's departments and all of that. We're being attacked. This is a strategy. And I want to talk a little bit about what's been going on. The fact of the matter is that the American military, the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, wants to fight the last war. They'll tell you, because I was there, they'll tell you that they're preparing for the next war. They'll tell you that. But the mere fact that we see their inaction now, their inability to cope with this, their incorrect briefings, whether done on purpose or to deceive the people that are the decision makers, it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is they're not prepared for the war that is being waged against you and them right now. And I maintain with their acquiescence. Look what Milley said. Look at McChrystal. Look at McMaster. You think they really, when they say they really want to protect the United States, you really think that's what they're about? No. They're doing everything opposite to that. And that's another program that I've talked about before and all that. But no, they're not. So let's talk about what is happening. And I'm going to read just a couple of things here. As I said, Unconstrained Analytics, Richard Higgins is part of that, Steve Coughlin. They write very good articles. You need to go there and read them. I don't want anybody to think that I blindly follow any of these guys. Okay, I don't. A lot of people that are in the know that I'm aware of. Matter of fact, I talked to Nancy Morgan Hart last night on the phone about this very thing. I take information from a lot of different places. You have to. You can't just use your confirmation bias and your prejudices and just listen to one side. You have to listen to if you have time, in order to properly analyze what's going on, you have to look at a lot of different sources. Unconstrained Analytics is just one for me. Okay, a lot of people are trying to tell me, my Republican insiders that I've talked to you about, and I've actually talked to them while I've been on a stream or a recorded video, because they'll tell me, look, Roy, Trump is our last hope. Trump isn't the guy. I've known Trump. I've read his stuff. I've been aware of his lifestyle and his beliefs. This one tells me, and he's a very good man, but this gentleman that I'm talking about who's telling me this, he's very good. He's not a psychiatrist, but he's very good at figuring people's characters out, their personalities, that type of thing. Very good at it. He'd make a great FBI agent, actually. But he's married to Trump as the only way we can get through, because he's saying, look, if Biden gets in, this is what's going to happen. It's going to really be bad. He's going to pack the court. He's going to do all these terrible things. You don't think I don't know that? Of course I know that. But Trump has been the slow-mo HRC, as I've said all along. And I've got to call. I can't just give Trump a pass, and you all know that. And I'm not going to. But all these people want to say, hey, he's really a good guy. He's just over his head. He's been deceived. Then he's not the man for the job. And we have to take it upon ourselves, like the sheriff is in Jacksonville. Okay, just as an example. Or Sheriff David Clark, if he was still there. The types of things that he was doing. We just have to do that. We can't depend on them anymore. But be that as it may, let me read you the type of warfare that we're seeing right now. This is very important, and I appreciate Steve Coughlin putting these up on Twitter. Rich Higgins has done the same, and some other very good intel analysts and people like that have been writing about this in the really important papers and think tanks and stuff like that aren't globalist controlled, that aren't Chinese controlled, that aren't pushing the Chinese narrative, right? And there are a lot of those. Obviously, you know that. Okay, let me read this real quick. Steve Coughlin, this is off Twitter. You can go look it up. He's at S_Coughlin, COUGHLIN_DC. Okay, and of course Rich Higgins is at Rich Higgins_DC. Just to give you an example, but the best thing to do is to go to unconstrainedanalytics.com, and you can read all of this there. Okay, it'll take you some time. It's quite a bit of information there, but let me show you the type of warfare that we're going under here. Back 2 decades ago, there were a couple of Chinese military officers, colonels, that wrote that the United States will not understand this type of unconventional warfare against us. And it's basically the way that Steve Coughlin and Rich Higgins talk about it. They call it political warfare. Okay, so that's the term I'm going to use, as political warfare. But it's not like between the Dems and the Repubs. Okay, that's not what we're talking about. And you'll see what I mean here in just a minute. And this is very important to understand why we're in so much trouble. So these 2 Chinese colonels came up with this political warfare, and it's basically unconstrained warfare, unrestricted warfare. Doing things that normally you wouldn't do, including attacking the civilian population on purpose through various methods, biological, chemical, attacks, by small teams, doing mass shootings. All of this is political warfare. Okay, and we think that it's criminal conduct, which it is, but it's actually warfare. Okay, again, few admit war against Americans is well underway. This isn't just criminal behavior that we're seeing. They're using criminals to cover the warfare actions. That's the key. It's not even civil disobedience. It's actually gone beyond Bill Ayers and the Weather Underground. The same types of plans, but it's being done by a state actor, China, with the help of traitors in our country that have been building China up for years because they want to destroy us. So, with that background, let's read this. This is Steve Coughlin talking. Well, let me go down to General Spalding first, who said something, and then Steve responded to that. General Spalding, this is not his entire tweet. General Spalding said, "This is a very important aspect of the Chinese Communist Party. They rely on the fact that we need evidence to act." Did you hear what I just said? Our military is not set up, despite what we've been told, to understand the dangers of asymmetric, unconventional warfare, also the political warfare aspect of those. Again, from General Spalding, this is a very important aspect of the Chinese Communist Party. They rely on the fact that we need evidence to act. Thus, they only have to hide what they are doing, and we believe it doesn't happen. The smuggling of the weapons, the forward operating, the forward operators that I've talked about from China that have been here for a while, them making alliances with, as much as they hate, what they're doing to the Muslims in their own country, They'll use the Muslims against us. They'll ally with the Muslims here, the Islamic Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Islamic extremists, jihadists, etc. They'll use those, even though they basically throw them in concentration camps in China. Remember, I wouldn't go to the bodies exhibits that were going around the country because, those were Falun Gong, for instance. They weren't Muslims, but I think they're probably going to do the same thing to the Uyghurs, I think is how they say it. I'm not sure how they say it, but anyway, the Muslims in China. So, again, thus, they only have to hide what they are doing, and we believe it doesn't happen. We're not set up. We think it's just merely people being upset with the government. Maybe rightly so, but they're using those organizations to conduct their military operations. Their concealment. When you're in battle, you have two types of things that you can use to keep from getting shot. All right? One is called concealment. That's just hiding behind a bush. In other words, doing the same thing that they're doing, hiding behind and inside these protests. That's concealment. Then you have cover, which is, you're hiding behind you're behind a concrete wall that's thick enough to stop rounds. That's cover. All right? But they're using concealment, and he says it right there. Thus, they only have to hide what they are doing, and we believe it doesn't happen. That's what General Spaulding's saying. Keep that in mind. Now, this is Steve Coughlin's response to that. Our entire CI and threat assessment protocols are based on political science narratives, which subordinates threat analysis to fictions. And there's a reason why this is being done. It's the same kind of thing that Fauci used when he used that study from Britain, that model that said that all this horrible stuff was going to happen with this Wuhan virus. It's the same thing. They use false paradigms, false programs, false analyses based upon fictions. And they do it because they can get away with it. People like Trump don't hold their feet to the fire and say, wait a minute, asshole. Let me read this again. I know, I get upset. I'm just thoroughly disgusted with the so-called leaders of this country from the White House on down. And yet, we're suffering from this because what have I said? When the wicked rule, the people mourn. And we've been wicked for a long time. The killing of babies, the stealing of widows' homes, unjust wars, on and on. Pedophiles running rampant throughout the world, and they're only picking up the low-hanging fruit. They're not getting the real problem. Okay, I got off track. Let me start reading again. Our entire counterintelligence, that's what CI stands for, our entire counterintelligence and threat assessment protocols are based on not facts, but political science narratives, which subordinates threat analysis to fictions, or to legal criteria designed to be insensitive to actionable intelligence. From China to drug lords to, I can't read this. Anyway, everyone knows this, but who? But us. Why don't we know this? Because the generals and all these different agencies, they say they're preparing for the next war, when in actuality, they're hiding the facts from the decision makers who will make a difference, because they're part of the problem. I'd like to admit, as Steve Coughlin is trying to say here, that they're just ignorant, that the Chinese knew that we wouldn't detect these actions because we're not built that way. See, in China, you have a group of people stand up to try to do, stand against the government. They recognize it for what it is. I'm not saying that it isn't right for those people to do that. The point is the Chinese know what it is, and they stomp it out. Here, see, they're using our system against us. We won't recognize it. Does that mean we have to violate our principles to fight it? No. No, not at all. But we have to admit what it is. And we're not. And I think by design on the part of our own leaders. Nobody can be this stupid for this long. And I know Steve and Richard Higgins would probably disagree with me on that. Oh, Roy, you don't know. Well, right now, with what's happened over the last few months, and even Rich Higgins has said, he's really disgusted with the lack of action that we're going down if we don't treat this for what it is. So, again, here, what he's saying basically is that, I'm going to read one more time here without the parentheses that I had before. Our entire CI and threat assessment protocols are based on political science narratives or to legal criteria designed to be insensitive to actionable intelligence. From China to drug lords, everyone knows this, but our people in the U.S. What's he talking about when he says legal criteria designed to be insensitive to actionable intelligence? Well, we're seeing it right now. The legal criteria for the Black Lives Matter and the Antifa, the legal criteria that we're looking at is, well, they have a right to their First Amendment to protest. True, right? Absolutely. But because of that, I mean, if again at Bundy Ranch, you go out there and we stood for the Constitution, right? We stood for the rights of these landowners. So we were at odds with the China system that was even trying to take over that land with the help of Harry Reid. So what did our intelligence agencies do and our law enforcement agencies? They fought against us. They brought a frickin' army out there. Well, I say against us, against the Bundys. And they didn't have to call it a standing army because they're law enforcement officers. But they were, you have military-style weapons from Apache helicopters to M16s, and that's a military operation. You can hide it behind law enforcement, but that's what it is. It's a standing army that's coming against the American people. And they were doing it to help the Chinese and Harry Reid under environmental excuses. And getting a retired judge who wasn't even on the bench to sign the order. It's terrible. So I do know the problem with the police. But here we go. So we are insensitive to actionable intelligence when it's the real enemy coming after us. So in other words, we know the Chinese operatives, other insurgents from jihadist extremists to drug cartels to race, how do I say? I'll just say it. Race superiority groups, okay, leftist Marxist groups, whatever. They're being trained by these different experts, these different military experts with links to China, or at least sympathetic to them. All you got to do is look at Nancy Pelosi and those people kneeling in the Capitol building. So we are insensitive to acting with that intelligence because it's masked, it's concealed, it's hidden behind what we think we need to protect. And I'm not saying we don't need to protect the First Amendment. It's absolutely important. But we also have to understand that we're under attack. Seriously under attack. And because it's political warfare, just like the Chinese said, we're not capable of understanding it, or we don't want to understand it. Either way, we're in a lot of trouble. Okay, I'm going to come up a little closer here. I can see it's a little difficult. Matter of fact, let me put this down just a little bit. I'm sorry. Hopefully I don't move the camera too much. Should have done this earlier. Okay, that should be a little better. Now, along with that, let me read this next thing he has here. I put out a tweet yesterday. I was really surprised to see he responded to my tweet. I said, remember the CBP, the Customs and Border Patrol, found weapons being smuggled into the United States from China. They found one cache. How many are around? Again, I bring up the ballistic vests I saw last summer. Okay? This is everywhere. So I said, responding to that situation with the smuggling of the weapons that were found, China, this is me, China's fast and furious to arm program. Remember, Holder used Fast and Furious to arm the drug cartels and the insurrectionists in Mexico, who were really then going to turn on us, right? Because they've already got Mexico, so they were going to turn on us, and he was going to use that to take out the Second Amendment, right? So I'm saying China's Fast and Furious to arm the Maoist insurrection in the U.S., the smuggling thing. The question is, how many has the Customs and Border Patrol not found? And this was Steve's response to me. Yes. Going back to 2016, we identified political warfare as the archetype attack vehicle, whether from Marxists or United Front partners like the like the Muslim Brotherhood. Frankly, they are allies in this now. Political warfare is also called the Maoist insurgency model. You see, he's verifying what I've told you. The U.S. left, people like Nancy Pelosi, people like Chuck Schumer, I'm naming them right now. They should be under arrest right now. The U.S. left adopted it in 1972. And they're in our institutions, and they're overthrowing our country. And they're coming after you. That's probably not an in-depth discussion. Please go to Unconstrained Analytics. We are in a war right now. And this isn't just an ideological battle of wits, of minds, of ideas. This is an actual kinetic action that is underway and is about ready to explode right now. Within the next 2-3 months, it's going to get out of control. Totally out of control. The central government won't help you. If anything, they'll suppress you. They're not going to help you because there are too many people involved at the higher levels of command that want this to happen. Petraeus. How many times do I have to name these people? Petraeus, McChrystal, McMaster, etc. They'll say, oh no, we're good Americans. No, you're not. And I've been calling this out for years. Even Trump brought Kissinger in and called him a good guy. Trump calls Fauci a great guy. What did he say with us the other day? I told you about the Luciferian situation that he said, right? Dr. Fauci is with us in all ways. Oh, if you only knew what that meant, ladies and gentlemen. Now, going back on that, let me just give a caveat here. I don't believe it, but I had one of my Republican insiders call me up and say, Roy, no, Trump is this great guy. He's being fooled, and he would never write something like that. Somebody else is writing that. You know, does Trump actually do his own tweets or not? I don't know. He claims he does. So this friend of mine who has studied Trump for a while and has been on the inside for a while, he says, look, Trump didn't do that. Trump doesn't know what that means. Well, looking at what he has inside his house and his statues of all these different deities and stuff, I'm not sure he doesn't know. And frankly, I think he does. But I'm just saying this for the benefit of my friend. My friend said, there's somebody else making these tweets, and Trump didn't actually do that. He wouldn't allow them to do that. That's a possibility, but I'm afraid I don't buy it. I think Trump does know what he's doing. Otherwise, and then there are other people saying, well, Roy, the NIH and the CDC and the WHO, they're too powerful. The president can't fight against them. He has to do what they say. Then what's the point? Why vote for the guy if he can't do it? Oh, Roy, they'll take him out of office. They'll do all these terrible things to him. Well, let me tell you a little story, okay? You're on the battlefield. I'll use a movie, okay? Go see The Big Red One. Mark Hamill was in it, and I always forget the other guy. Why I forget him, I don't remember. But he plays the sergeant. It's on D-Day, and they're going in. And they're under heavy fire. Okay? Think about Trump saying, well, I can't do it because the CDC or people that make excuses for him. He can't do it because they'll come after him. He won't make it to a second term. If he's not doing the job, he's not worth having in there anyway, in my opinion, because he's a slow-mo HRC. But getting back to the movie. So they're on the beach and nobody can move forward. Lee Marvin, that's the guy who was in this. Lee Marvin and Mark Hamill. Lee Marvin is the sergeant. He's trying to get his men to go forward, and then, oh, they're under this fire. So finally he says, you go forward or I will shoot you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in a war, and Trump needs to act. And if he doesn't act, he's complicit. He's not just ignorant or stupid. And I'm sorry for to have to say that to my good friends, but I have to look at it for what it is. I'm not going to mince my words. Trump is involved in taking down the United States. Everything that's happened, he's been a cover as a Christ figure, that he's persecuted. He came out the other day with a totally ridiculous tweet. He says, lone warrior, talking about himself. Steve Coughlin, Richard Higgins, and my other Republican insiders are not going to like me going there. Trump was right when he said, they're coming after you. And he says, I thought they were coming after me. They're coming after you. They have to tell you what they're doing. I'm not so sure that Trump wasn't telling us, you're really the people we're going to take down. We're taking you out. I don't want you to have your Second Amendment. We're going to have total amnesty, whether or not I get elected the second time. But Kushner's working on it right now. I'm sorry, the evidence suggests that this is not what it has appeared to be. And what was the point of Steve Coughlin's thing there about hiding? Again, General Spaulding. Thus, they only have to hide what they are doing, and we believe it doesn't happen. And then Steve Coughlin saying, we use legal criteria designed to be insensitive to actionable intelligence. They don't even have to cover from fire. They just have to conceal themselves and pretend to be what they are not, which is what you're doing when you're concealing yourself. You're hiding behind a bush. You're pretending to be a part of the bush. See what I'm saying? You're still vulnerable to fire, but you're concealing what you are and what you're actually about. And then I'm going to end on this, and we'll go to a few, and we're almost here at an hour, and I can tell, of course, because my coffee's about done. It's cold. I never was much for cold coffee. Notice they're taking, they keep talking about the new normal, and of course, now we're having the second shutdown. Masks, by the way, I got to show you this picture. When the Denver airport was built many years ago, the new one, I actually saw the murals in there, and it showed this dystopic future with people wearing gas masks and AK-47s and being controlled by people that look more like Chinese troops than American troops. Either way, that would be bad. But there's some bad stuff in the Denver airport, and we all, I think, know that there's an underground complex there for the elite. NORAD's just down the road a piece. It's probably connected to it, probably by a tunnel system. But this was in 1994 at the Denver airport. Let me put this up and see if you can see this. Can you see that? This is a mural at the... Sorry, I'm getting my light in there. This is a mural at the Denver airport in 1994. Do you see anything funny there? Now, don't worry about the circle there. It's talking about, obviously in Arab there, but all these people are wearing masks. Different countries are represented on those masks. This is Denver Airport in 1994, ladies and gentlemen. This has been a planned warfare against us and the decent people in the world. It's being led by, at the least, very evil men. At the worst, the devil himself. Devil influencing evil men. I don't care. Nothing that we're seeing now is coincidence. We're not getting hit by another wave of this. We're even being told that a new pig flu is coming out. Do you see? It's everything to keep you down. All right? And what's the purpose of it? To destroy humanity. If not, in effect, kill them, make them so they no longer have human contact, human emotions, trying to make them into robots. There is a poster on Twitter. He goes by Jeff Sekarak. I really enjoy his stuff. Apparently he's a bodybuilder. I'm not sure, but he put out a tweet yesterday, and I have to quote him because he's absolutely right. Listen to what he says. This is a war on you, and they're attacking you with the virus claims, which aren't as bad as they say they are. Not that they couldn't release an Ebola or something too. They probably would like to do that, but they're hitting you with that. They're hitting you with now this entire insurrection that's going on. And they're hiding the fact that it's actually a Maoist insurrection. Nobody's really saying that. Nobody. Except people that are willing, like myself and Steve Coughlin and some of these others. You're certainly not hearing it out of Trump's mouth or the DOD or even the FBI. The FBI is still saying that the greatest danger in the United States is white supremacists and constitutionalists. Because the FBI supports the leftist, Marxist, Maoist models, and we're the enemy of the FBI. That should be abundantly clear to everyone today. Back to Jeff Sekarak. Sunlight, fresh air, pure food, human contact, purposeful work. Have you noticed? They've criminalized all that makes you well. They've criminalized human behavior. Good human behavior. There are bad human behaviors. But they're criminalizing your existence. What is the CO2 poisoning of the planet all about? The global warming, the climate change they call it now. They keep saying that CO2 is a bad gas. It's a poisonous gas, and it's the greenhouse effect is destroying the planet. Horseshit. They couldn't tell you that they want to kill you by suffocating you by taking away your oxygen. So most people don't know that CO2 is a necessary part of the life cycle. So they said, let's tell them that we have to cut down on the CO2 emissions. Never mind that we're at the lowest CO2 levels probably in the last 10,000 years. The Industrial Revolution was actually a godsend, putting CO2 back in the atmosphere. Not so much the other pollutants. But CO2 is not the problem. These demons are like Dr. Fauci, like Bill Gates, like Al Gore, on down the line. They're criminalizing your existence, ladies and gentlemen. And as it sits right now, we are well underway to a Maoist insurrection war that is going to totally become unmanageable in the next few months, possibly weeks. Your leaders either don't recognize it because it's political warfare, as Steve Coughlin was talking about, and we're not sensitive to those types of intelligence information because we look at war in a different aspect than this political warfare that he's described, or they're complicit. At many echelons of the government, that's levels of government, I think they're complicit. And all of this theater that's been happening over the last 3.5 years has been done merely to mask, to hide, to conceal what they're really about. And Trump, I believe, is involved. The only way he can convince me otherwise is if he makes an open repentance. But he says, I don't have anything to repent about. I've never done anything wrong. Roger Stone was supposed to be incarcerated, but I think there's a stay in that right now because of the COVID to the Wuhan. So Trump is putting off any type of pardon of Stone, because the optics are, I think, that he's saying he just wants, this to be reversed, somehow by the Justice Department or whatever. That's the optics, just like he did with the Flynn thing. He's waiting, but I don't think so. I don't think that's what's going on. I think he's going to let. I think, not saying I'm 100% right, but it's looking like to me that Roger Stone's going to end up in prison or at least house arrest. And of course, Assange. I have people that disagree with me. Assange isn't an American citizen. He doesn't deserve his rights. Man, don't say that. Don't say that. Of course he deserves his rights. Okay, so that's all I've really got this morning. I just wanted to do that. I've already been over an hour. I didn't say I was going to pay a whole lot of attention to chat today. That wasn't my intention, but I'll look at a few of them if you'd like me to. I don't object to that. By the way, for those of you who can afford it or have the ability, I know a lot of you probably know this because you've seen him either on InfoWars or other places. Joel Skousen, Joel Joel Skousen, Skousen, wrote a book called Strategic Relocation. If you want to know places that if you have the ability to go to, you might want to get Joel's book. Okay, time is short. If you have that idea that you want to make some type of a move now, you've got to get this information today. I don't have any investment in Joel. Actually, Joel doesn't like me because I was not a mainstream Mormon when I was in the Mormon church. So Joel has he would rather, I think, have contact with somebody like Alex Jones than he would ever me. As a matter of fact, I'll just leave it at that. I knew his uncle, Cleon Skousen, was an acquaintance of mine. He wrote The Naked Communist. He was an FBI director for a while, the Salt Lake City police chief for a while. He was a professor at BYU when I was there. I talked to him not as friends but as acquaintances. I took his class on his course on the Constitution. I forget what the name of it was now, but I did that. So I've had contact with Cleon Skousen, Joel's uncle, for many, many years. Cleon died many years ago, but Joel is related to him, and he's aware of these things. And the book Strategic Relocation is something that you might want to look at, but you're running out of time if that's your plan to go somewhere else. You've got to make the decision like today. I mean, it's that serious. Okay, all right. Mask is slavery to government. Exactly. And of course it's training so that when, you can't go into a store without a mask, and that's almost everywhere now. I still refuse to wear them. They come up to me and I'll argue with them. I'm not going to get in a fight with somebody, but the mask is training, and of course the inoculation, which isn't an inoculation, it's nothing more than the mark of the beast, is coming up. By the way, I got a tweet, a DM on Twitter the other day, yesterday as a matter of fact, where a guy sent me a video. I'm not going to name the person that sent it to me or the video itself, but basically it was a Christian preacher who was saying that all the hullabaloo about the vaccines and the testing being part of the mark of the beast implementation is false, and that that's not the way it is. And he goes through a bunch of scriptures and all that. And this guy that sent it to me said, "See, you're wrong about the vaccine and about the testing. And listen to this, and you'll see." Listen. And I wrote back and I told this guy, "Do you know what the clergy response teams are in the DHS?" The clergy response teams are out there to convince otherwise awake Christians that they need to do what the government tells them to do, that it's okay, that God will approve, that it's really okay. Sort of like Romans 13. They always use Romans 13 to justify, the power of government, be it legitimate, illegitimate, or tyrannical. It doesn't matter. God's authority put those people into power, and so we're to submit. Well, he doesn't understand the history of Romans 13 or the history of the time, and I don't have time to go through it here. But I did mention that Pastor Chuck Baldwin has explained, who ran for president of the Libertarian ticket back many years ago, about 2008, I think, maybe earlier. Pastor Chuck Baldwin, you can find him on YouTube and on the web. He writes a blog, and he talks about what Romans 13 was really about. He doesn't go into the depth that I would like to historically, but he approaches it from a scriptural point of view, and he shows that it's misused by most Christians who want to do what? To make you support the government no matter what it does. Does that mean when you were in Russia, during the Bolshevik Revolution, that if the government told you to go kill a bunch of peasants, you do it because the government is right and Romans 13 says you're supposed to do it? Hogwash. Okay, so at any rate, the DHS, to get these people roped in, these traditional Christians, they have these clergy response teams. I can tell you right off the bat, and I hope that person's listening today, I send him back a DM, that's a member of the DHS clergy response teams to make you subject yourself to the government no matter what it does. Just a warning. By their fruits you shall know them. It's not hard, ladies and gentlemen. If it impinges on your liberty, if it takes away your right to judgment, in other words, figuring things out for yourself. If it says that, we're the leaders, we do the thinking, and when we do the thinking, your thinking is done. Never subject your own. As a matter of fact, I've quoted that before. It's out of the Last of the Mohicans movie. And the lady in there, Miss Monroe, if you remember this movie, she said, "I would rather make the gravest of mistakes than surrender my own judgment." You have to have that same spirit in you. I would rather make the gravest of mistakes than surrender my own judgment. Best line in the movie. What if the family, hi Finest Planet, what if your family that you're living with don't get it? Yeah. The only thing I can say to that is that story of Jesus, right? When he was preaching, he was teaching inside a place, and there was a knock at the door, and they answered it, and then his disciple came over and said, "Hey, your mom and your family's outside. They want to talk to you." And he says, "Who is my family? Who is my brother? Who is my sister? Those who do the will of my Father in heaven." You got to make your own judgment, Finest Planet. I don't know. Yeah, face the sky. The Lord hates a coward. That's true. That's true. Fomenting discord. I like this. I've made so many mistakes that I can finally trust my own judgment. I like you. I like you. And that's really what life is about, isn't it? This is a school. It really is. And you learn by mistakes, and there are all sorts of sayings about that in the Batman movie is, why do we fall down so we can get back up? You've just made a good one. I made so many mistakes. Now I've arrived at the point I can trust my own judgment. That was very good. That's a classic one. Thank you for putting that up. Oh, that's a good point. Marianne Jenkins says, "Are you all staying home over the weekend or going out?" We can't live in fear, but you also have to use discretion and discernment. I'm not saying not to go out to places, but just be aware that I'm telling you, you're being hunted. You're being hunted. You can't cower, but you have to. Keep yourself aware of your surroundings. Keep your situational awareness on high. Always have an avenue of escape planned when you go anywhere. Okay? And an alternate. Do you see what I'm saying? And then consider what the avenues of approach of somebody who's trying to hurt you might be. I mean, hell, they could be up on a tree with a gun and, like what happened in Las Vegas, and just shoot a bunch of people. You don't really know, and some things you can't protect yourself against. But the main thing is awareness. You can't be walking around with your earplugs in on your cell phone watching a video, when you're outside. I had a friend that was hit by a train that did that. She was outside. Actually, she was jogging and she had her earphones in, listening to music, and she was crossing a railroad track. She didn't look. Yeah. One of the tragedies in my life, and certainly in hers and her family's. You got to be aware. You got to have your situational awareness on when you're out. Even in your own home, you need to. And as I said, they're going to start coming to homes like they have already. They're going to start coming to homes of activists, of people who support the Constitution and Christianity and the Bill of Rights, etc. They're going to come, so you have to be ready to defend yourselves at all times. And yes, the government's going to make you the bad guy if you end up shooting one of them. And that's wrong, because we are in a war. If we had Chinese troops coming across the border of your state and you got out there and you were shooting Chinese troops that are trying to take over your state, you'd be justified. But you see, it goes back again to what Steve Coughlin said here. And they're using this against us. Our own law enforcement, our own justice system is using it against us. And what does he say? Our entire CI and threat assessment protocols are based on political science narratives, and I might say political correctness as well, or to legal criteria, the criminal code, designed to be insensitive to actionable intelligence, from China to drug wars, to Al Qaeda, to the MS-13 and the gangs, to all that. We're insensitive to it, even though other countries are not, like China. China knows, Russia knows, but we refuse to because they've used our legal system against us, and so now we don't recognize actionable intelligence. Okay, I didn't get into much this morning. We're an hour and 15 minutes. I don't want to go any longer. Coffee's cold. The mind can only absorb what the seat can endure. I want to thank you all for coming. And this is serious, ladies and gentlemen. We're at that point. We're beyond the tipping point. It's done. Okay. Watching what's happening, seeing the movements. They're shooting semi-truck drivers on the road, regular drivers. That happened in Oakland, California, yesterday or the day before. I was given that information by a close friend. And a lot of this isn't making it into the media because the media doesn't, again, it's being hidden from you. Okay? Trump's right. The media is our enemy, but he's not doing much better. He's not telling us either. I'm just telling you the facts. He might want to, giving him the benefit of the doubt, he might be wanting to project confidence and everything's okay. But I'll tell you, if I'm out on that trail and there's a wild bear coming around the corner and somebody sees it, I want him to tell me. I don't want him to just say, oh, everything's okay, you're going to be fine. No. Your political career, President Trump, if that's what you're concerned about, it's not, but giving him the benefit of the doubt. If your political career isn't as important, your reelection isn't even as important as you helping people to survive today. With that mentality, a war of attrition is unavoidable with the attitude he's got right now. And you're in danger because he's not doing his job. And neither is the entire federal government. I don't see anybody really talking about any of this. It's going down, ladies and gentlemen. We're being balkanized. It's happening. Okay, that's all I got. Let's see if I can do this without messing the system up, which I, like I say, doing it on my own, it's a little bit of a problem. Okay. Thanks, my mods, for being here. Edelson James, I imagine Nancy's on here in Headlines with a Voice. Kay Smalls, Jesse from BP Earthwatch, and I always forget one of them. Anyway, I appreciate all your help. If you saw any misbehavior, I appreciate you taking care of it. And we'll be seeing you soon. Keep your eyes on the horizon, your ears to the ground, situational awareness on high. Remain armed as often and as many places as you can. This is going. We're at the kinetic stage now, and it's just going to pick up the tempo at this point. And there's nobody there that's going to help you. Maybe some local sheriffs. By the way, just so you know, he's not my governor, but I was talking to somebody yesterday and talking to them about Utah being a possible area to relocate. There are some exceptions to that. We do have Democrats in control in Salt Lake and in both in the city and in the county there, which is why there's some really bad things happening. The governor right now, Herbert, is a weak-minded individual. He's Republican, but he doesn't know what the hell he's doing, and he's weak-minded. I'll just say that, and he's weak all the way around. He's a little scared little man. However, it looks like Cox is running for governor. And it looks like he's stronger than Huntsman at this point. So if Cox gets in, not Huntsman, I think Huntsman would be I know Huntsman would be a bad pick for Utah. But so was Mitt Romney, and they were stupid enough to put Romney in there as a senator. So I don't know what those idiots in Utah are going to do. But if Cox can get in, I think some things might change. He's a rancher, and that's really what he's done most of his life. He's close to the ground and the people. If there is a political person in Utah that should get in as governor, it's probably Cox. I'm not being paid to be to tell you that. But it's just if in fact Cox gets in, this area, Wyoming, like I said, Wyoming, Utah, Idaho, Montana, the Intermountain West area is a good place to relocate. Not necessarily close to the cities, but if you can get out in the countryside, etc., it would probably be a good place. So just so you know. Now the problem, of course, is Cox wouldn't be governor until next year, and I think things are going down before that. Okay, but just so you know. Okay, everybody, thanks for coming. Don't know when I'll see you again, of course. Oh, by the way, I have a big to-do over the next 2 weeks. If I'm not on, it's one of the times when our family gets together. It's a big, big get-together. We do it every year. And, I'll probably have some time to come on. I don't know if I'll be able to do anything formal like this. Maybe I will. I'm not sure. But my priorities will be to be with them, both for love and affection and association and all that, but also so that we can discuss more preparations. Okay? All right. Out here, I hope you have a great July 4th and stay safe. Okay? Thanks bunch.